Hey pals, I'm here today to go for a big stack of books with you. So I recently uploaded an autumn/winter TBR video, which I'll link above, and I'm working my way through those books, and really that's enough to be getting on with. But I've just become excited about so many different books in the last month or so. I requested loads more from the library, and then I also treated myself to quite a few books, which isn't something I tend to do anymore. I read predominantly from the library, and then in terms of books I buy, I tend to mainly just buy like pre-order books by favourite authors. But there was quite a few books I've been interested in for a while, and my library didn't have copies, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to treat myself to them because I've had a bit of a rubbish time lately, as I've mentioned. And so I just thought, you know, screw it, I'm going to order these books. So I'm going to try go through these in some sense of order, because there are a few different sort of types of books here, I guess. Quite a few of them are library books, so I will try and hold them so there isn't too much glare from the shiny covers. The first one is the beautiful A Guest in the House by Emily Carroll. So I've read Emily Carroll's previous graphic novels and really enjoyed them, but I think there's a chance I could love this one because her previous books, the one most people know is Through the Woods, which is, I think, 5 fairy tale retellings that are sort of retold in a sort of a horror way. And like I said, they're sort of fairy tale focused, whereas this is sort of set in the real world, and it is about a woman who lives in a house beside a lake with her husband and her stepdaughter. And she wants to convince herself they're really happy, but she is unsure about what happened to her husband's previous wife. And so she sort of starts to think about that more. And it says, what secrets does their strange house by the water harbour, and what of Abby's old dreams and fears of Lady Grey, the Knight and the Dragons? In her chilling return, a story of grief, ghosts and the struggle between oneself, Emily Carroll casts another unforgettable spell. And I've had a flick through this book and it is just absolutely beautiful. So I'm hoping to curl up soon with this one dark evening and be thoroughly spooked. So there is that one. And the next one, I think I came across this because I was looking into the Redwall series by Brian Jacks, a few of which I read when I was a child, and I've meant to revisit them ever since and never have. And this series was recommended as books for adult readers who enjoyed Redwall, and that is the Shady Hollow series. The first book is called Shady Hollow, a murderous mystery by Juno Black. The premise of this is set in this cute little town. A murder occurs, but every person in the story is an animal, okay? So the person who has been killed is the town's querulous toad. And Vera Vixen is new in town. She has a nose for news and catches the scent of a story, one that leads her to dark places. And she realises that lots of the town's inhabitants may be lying. So there is an introduction to this book by the author that says, like, you need to get over the fact that some of these animals are like entirely different sizes, but function in society with one another, and sort of just accept the animal descriptions as like more of a metaphor. But yeah, I just think this sounds like it could be really good. I think there's 4 books so far in this series, so if I enjoy it, I can carry on to the next ones. Let me know if you've read these because I'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts. This next book I stumbled across in a bookshop and was intrigued by because I liked the sound of the premise, but I saw that it was compared to Sarah Waters and Donna Tartt, who are 2 of my favourite authors. Now, I don't usually trust comparisons to authors like them because it's an easy thing for a publisher to do to get people to buy the book, and usually it's not very accurate. However, I do really like the sound of this book. I didn't buy it in the shop because it had quite low ratings, but afterwards John and I were talking about like why I avoid books if they have low ratings, and like what the rating system on Goodreads and Storygraph really means to me. And I realised that a couple of the Sarah Waters books I love, and I think one of Donna Tartt's books, has a similar rating to this book, which I think is around 3.50. And so I was like, what the hell, I'm gonna give this book a go. So I requested it from my library. And that is Killingly by Catherine Boutner. This is set in 1897 at a women's college in America. I'm not sure what state, it doesn't say. And it says, all the young girls there are famed for their virtue and beauty, except for Agnes and Bertha. Bertha goes missing, an investigation ensues, and it appears that everybody at the college has different reasons for sort of trying to cover things up and to hinder this investigation. It says, this is a story of a woman who defies strict rules. Killingly is a gripping novel of intrigue and surprising twists. And I read the first couple of pages and really liked the writing style. So yeah, I have fairly high hopes for this one, and I'm trying not to get too excited. And then funnily enough, I was looking into another author called Simone St. James, who I've heard people talk about before. And I've always meant to give one of her books a go around this time of year because she writes mysteries that I think have an edge of the gothic and the supernatural. And when I was looking for all of her books, this is the one I decided to read first. And when I picked it up the same day as I picked up Killingly, I realised they have pretty similar sounding blurbs. So I definitely have a specific taste. This one is The Broken Girls, and it is set in 1950 at the crumbling Idlewild Hall School for Unwanted Girls. It says 4 roommates begin to bond over dark secrets and whispered fears until one of them mysteriously disappears. Then in the present day, our protagonist can't get over the fact that her sister disappeared 20 years ago near the ruins of Idlewild. Then also someone else goes missing, or her body is found near the school. So yeah, all these rumours start, and our protagonist starts to uncover horrors that were meant to remain hidden. So yeah, there's that one. Let me know if you've read any books by Simone St. James and what you thought of them. And the next 2 books are both recommendations from Chris, who has a YouTube channel called Chris's Bookish Cauldron, but I think spoke about both of these books on the podcast, the book club. I can never say it, the Bookcast Club, which he is a member of. And yeah, I really share a similar taste to Chris, and he spoke about both these books in such an enthusiastic way that I just immediately wanted to read both of them. This first book he spoke about when it came out a couple of years ago, and I thought I'd added to a list of books to read, and seemingly I hadn't, so I'd forgotten about it until he mentioned it again. It sounds a little bit similar to the 2 previous books, I'm not going to lie, although I think quite different in writing style. And that is Disappearing Earth by Juliet Phillips. The premise of this is that on the shoreline of a northeastern edge of Russia, 2 sisters are abducted. In the ensuing weeks, then months, the police investigation turns up nothing. It is set on the remote Siberian peninsula of Kamchatka, and it draws us into a world of an astonishing cast of characters, all connected by an unfathomable crime. It says we are transported to vistas of rugged beauty, densely wooded forests, open expanses of tundra, soaring volcanoes, and the glassy seas that border Japan and Alaska. I love the sound of all that, and I think this one sounds like a good book to read as it's getting colder, which the temperature suddenly dropped here, which I'm very happy about. And I believe the way this is written, a lot of people have said this is more like a collection of interconnected short stories, which is something I'm absolutely fine with. And the premise of this reminds me of Reservoir 13 by John McGregor, which I really enjoyed. That was also about I think one young teenage girl who had gone missing, and we follow the inhabitants of that village for I think the following 20 years, and I really enjoyed that. I think it's a really interesting structure to hang a novel on. So yeah, intrigued by this one. This next one isn't really the right book to be reading this time of year, in all honesty. I've just realised it says it's set in one sweltering week in July, but as I said, I heard Chris talk about it and rave about it. And that is The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty. This came out earlier in the year, and it was one I was interested in but unsure about, so I thought I would wait to hear more reviews. This is compared to the film The Florida Project, which I really enjoyed. The Rabbit Hutch is a sort of low-cost housing development, which I think is being threatened with destruction, and we follow a group of characters who live in the Rabbit Hutch, one of which is an 18-year-old girl who's just been released from foster care and is trying to stop the destruction of the Rabbit Hutch. And yeah, I think this is also a little bit experimental, and yeah, the writing style seems like it's going to be really detailed and just maybe something a little bit different. So I am very intrigued. Also, let me know if you've read that one. And next, this is a bit random, but I stumbled across a calendar for 2024, and it was a Brambley Hedge calendar. And I'd forgotten that Brambley Hedge existed. These are picture books I read as a child, although I think they may have come out early in the 90s, I'm not quite sure. And so I thought to myself, I'd really like to buy these for my niece because I think they're wonderful. And you can get a box set of all of them. But I was unsure about the appropriate age range. My niece is 2, and also, some children's books date badly. So I thought I'm going to borrow one of these from the library and see if it is as lovely as I remember it being. And I remember that they did like seasonal books. So I've picked up Autumn Story. So these are, like I said, the Bramley Hedge books by Jill Barklam. And did you read these when you were a child? They are so beautiful. I'm definitely going to get the calendar because it's just lovely. And I've had a flick through this and yeah, just lovely. I cannot wait to read this. I'm going to curl up again one evening with a cup of tea and treat myself to reading this one. And yeah, and if I enjoy it, I will carry on reading them all because there's like Christmas ones, and yeah, just very excited. Let me know if you read Bramley Hedge as a child. And then I have a big list of fantasy books I want to get to, mainly adult, but I also have a few middle grade and YA fantasy series that people have recommended to me. And I've been trying to get hold of them, but my library hasn't got copies, and so I just thought, you know, screw it. I really feel like I'm in the mood to be swept away with some fantasy. Again, I tend to read fantasy more in the colder and darker months, not sure why that is. And I saw the author Sarah Perry post about this book on her Instagram, and it was a book I had on my list to pick up, but you know, I have a big list of books to pick up. But she is someone who regularly disparages YA, and as do I, to be honest. And she was saying this is, you know, one of the best young adult novels she's ever read. This was actually published, I think, in the 1950s, before young adult books were really a thing. So yeah, I'm very intrigued. And that is The Eagle of the Ninth by Rosemary Sutcliffe. This is a really nice edition. There's lots of different editions of this book, obviously. And yeah, so I decided to pick this one up. So this is about the Ninth Legion, who marched into the mists of northern Britain and then were never seen again. 4,000 men disappeared and their eagle standard was lost. I had a look into this, and I think this is like a sort of legend. It was rumoured to be true, but there's also evidence that like the Ninth Legion never actually existed. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the premise of this is we're following a young boy called Marcus, who his father, I think, led the Legion, so he sets off to try and find the Ninth Legion. And this is supposed to be like, yeah, just a really great epic adventure story. So I'm intrigued to read a young adult novel published so long ago. The next one, I've been meaning to read some Tamora Pierce books. I think that perhaps these books were coming out when I was a child. Okay, this came out in 1983, so I guess I was born in 1990, so a little bit earlier, so perhaps that's why I didn't read them. But I've heard people talk about her books a lot over the years and always meant to give her books a go. But again, you never really see them over here in the UK, and also I didn't really know where to start. I've since done some more research and realised that for like the big series that people talk about, the place to start is Alana, the First Adventure, which is it part of the Song of the Lioness quartet? I think maybe. Yes, it is. There's loads of different editions of these books. I think there's even some new UK editions coming out in a few months' time, but I didn't want to wait. And in all honesty, I prefer this edition. So I think there's like 3 or 4 separate series that are linked within this world. And yeah, I'm hoping to really enjoy this and then just want to speed through them all. It's very short, so it's one I could probably sit and read in a couple of hours. We follow Alana. She wants to be a knight in a time when girls are forbidden to be knights. And yeah, so she sort of tries to get away with that. It says we follow her on her adventures that are filled with swords and sorcery, adventure and intrigue, good and evil. And I think animal companions are quite a big feature of Tamora Pierce's books, which is probably the main reason why I want to read them, I'm not going to lie. So yeah, hoping that could be a really nice, cosy read. And this next one I've had recommended to me a lot. This is a YA fantasy, which I don't tend to enjoy, but when I've asked for adult fantasy recommendations, this is a book that time and time again people have been like, don't worry about it being YA, please give it a go because it's amazing. And it's the start of quite a long series, I think. And that is The Demon King by Cinda Williams Chimer. Again, lots of different editions of these books, but this one was the easiest one to get hold of. I think the premise of this is that we follow 2 characters. One is a young princess who is sort of bound by the conventions of her role and really hates being a princess and wants to become like this warrior who famously killed the Demon King. And then we're also following this young boy from a completely different background who stumbles across a young wizard and takes control of his amulet, which controls his magic. And somehow these 2 characters, their paths cross. And yeah, there's some sort of big epic story about this fantasy world that they are both at the heart of. So yeah, I think this is a pretty epic series. I've heard really great reviews for it. So yeah, I'm intrigued to give this one a go. I have actually read the first 30 pages, so I can't really comment at this moment because barely read anything, but I have started this one. And this next one is an adult fantasy, but I'm not quite sure. This could be one that sort of like crosses the line between adult and YA fantasy, and that is Fires of the Faithful by Naomi Kritzer. I do quite like these mass market fantasy paperbacks, and I have found that I tend to enjoy sort of cozy, slightly lower stakes fantasy that centres women that came out in like 90s, early 2000s. This book fulfills those things. I think this is part of a duology and is focused around a 16-year-old girl who lives at a music conservatory. So I think musical magic is like quite a big part of the story. And she finds out that there's this sort of governing power that is a bit nefarious, and it's about her trying to sort of escape that. And yeah, I've heard good things. This has been compared to the author Sharon Shin. I've read a couple of her books and really enjoyed them. So I'm hoping this is a really good cozy fantasy book. Then I have a few short story collections. This first one I stumbled across, I think Johnny actually. I was in a bookshop with Johnny and he saw this one on a table and picked it up, I think because of the cover. And that is Attention Seekers by Emma Brankin. And we turned to the first page, the first story, and the first sentence is, "The cat surpasses Ash in Instagram followers," which I think is a great first sentence, and the story is called Cat a Day. And I had a look at the blurb, and it says this focuses on an eclectic group of characters who struggle with the lure of the limelight. A teenager escapes school gossip to hang out with a dead Tudor queen. A reality show applicant has a bitter axe to grind. A spiralling woman weaponises her cat's internet fame to keep track of her ex. And a guest has a mute meltdown while reluctantly attending a silent retreat. It says this is a tour de force of dark humour and social commentary, distracting when it means to take up space and be seen, and at what cost. I think that sounds really intriguing. This is from quite a small press, so it only has a couple of reviews online. But like I said, I had a flick through and had a look at the writing style, and felt really pulled in by it. So I'm going to give this one a go. And then these next two I treated myself to. It felt quite extravagant buying these because most of the short story collections I'm interested in reading are from indie presses in Canada and North America. They tend to be quite expensive to get hold of over here, and so I don't buy them as often as I would like to. But I am really in the mood to read short story collections, and so I decided to treat myself to a couple of them. This first one has an absolutely excellent title, and that is Shut Up You're Pretty by Taya Matonji. This is from VS Imprints, and this is the first book published under that imprint, I believe. The imprint is run by Vivek Shraya. I've read a couple of their books and really enjoyed them. And the series features work by new and emerging young writers who are Indigenous, Black or people of colour. And so if I enjoy this one, I'll definitely carry on picking up more books from this imprint. This is a collection of interconnected short stories that follow one young Congolese Canadian woman, and it says, tinged with pathos and humour, these punchy, sharply observed stories interrogate the moments in which femininity, womanness and identity are not only questioned but also imposed. And I've read a couple of interlinked short story collections and I actually really enjoy them. And so maybe when I've read a few more, I'll do a recommendations video. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. The first story in this collection is called Tits for Cigs, which I think is an excellent title, so can't wait to dive into that one. And this next one is a more recent release. I think it came out last year, and that is Sleeping Alone by Rue Freeman. That is also a brilliant cover. And it says this is a rich and textured collection about crossing borders, both real and imagined. It spans the globe, moving from the secrets kept by siblings in Sri Lanka to the lives of itinerants in New York City to the unspoken love between a boarder and his landlady in Dublin. These deftly controlled stories almost prickle the skin with their secrets, with the shame and longing and injustice, both personal and structural, that is revealed. Rue Freeman is an author of rare genius. The types of characters it's talking about, that's the sort of thing I really love reading. Characters who sort of span the globes. I really enjoy reading stories about immigrants. And yeah, the reviews for this collection are excellent. And so I'm hoping to really enjoy this one. And then I picked up a copy of our very own Jen Campbell's newest book, which is a poetry collection called Please Do Not Touch This Exhibit. I really like this cover. And yeah, I'm hoping to read this one very soon. I've heard Jen talk about what this collection's about, and I think it sounds really interesting, also difficult to read. I don't read a lot of poetry because I often find that I sort of miss the point of poetry. But I think it makes it a lot easier for me to engage with a poetry collection when I know the person who's written it and know the topics they're writing about. So, and I've read Jen's writing before and really enjoy her poetry. It's very visual, I find, and I can sort of really picture the pictures she's trying to create. So very excited to read that one. And then I have a stack of non-fiction books to get through, which I will try and get through quickly because I'm aware this is already quite a long video. The first one is Abandon Me, Memoirs by Melissa Febos. I read Girlhood from this author last year and absolutely loved it. That was a collection of personal essays. She is both a brilliantly beautiful and intelligent writer, and her essays really pushed me to think more deeply about some of the topics she explored, and I thought they were absolutely brilliant. It says, in these linked essays, the author tries to reconnect with her birth father and finds that an instinct for self-erasure binds them as surely as their blood. The hypnotic story of an all-consuming, long-distance affair with a woman marks her exploration of the worship and withdrawal that haunt her love life. Woven throughout is her insatiable hunger for self-knowledge, the difficult kind, and a powerful conviction that universal truths begin there. That all sounds fascinating. Cannot wait to read it. And this next one was recommended to me by my therapist. That's the first time I've ever said that, and hopefully not the last. And that is The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love by Sonia Renee Taylor. This is a book I'd heard about, but it was good to have it pushed up my non-fiction TBR, which I think currently says around 300 books that I want to read, so it helps to have people push a book up. And yeah, this is quite a short book, but I'm flicking through and it looks like essays, and it says that the author offers radical self-love as the balm to heal the wounds inflicted by violent systems. She's a world-renowned activist and poet, and she invites us to reconnect with the radical origins of our minds and bodies and celebrate our collective enduring strengths. She confronts some of the most challenging systems of oppression, such as transphobia, racism, and more. And yeah, I'm interested to give this one a go. Don't know much about it. Let me know if you've read it. This next one's a little bit random, but I stumbled across this in a bookshop. It's a topic I'd meant to read about because a couple of novels I've really enjoyed have touched on the topic, and I've always thought I'd like to have more context for that history so that I can get more out of any novel I might read. And I am planning to read His Bloody Project in the next couple of months, and I think this non-fiction book will give me some context for that. The book being The Scottish Clearances, A History of the Dispossessed by T.M. Devine. So, as I said, the Scottish clearances have come up in quite a few historical books I've read based in Scotland. I mean, it's something I've done a quick Google about and learn the basics for. It's not something we were taught at school or ever really comes up in just general conversation, but it's something I'm really interested in. And when I recently visited Scotland, we went on like a tour, a coach tour of the Highlands, and the tour guide was really great, and he spoke in depth about the clearances. And then yeah, I saw this in a bookshop, and so I thought I would give it a go. It's probably going to be pretty bleak. I don't know how hard going it's going to be, so we shall see. Hopefully I'll really enjoy it. I would really like to read more sort of like geopolitical history books, because there's just always more things to learn. So there we go. This next one has been on my list since it came out, and I was just having a look through my non-fiction TBR and figuring which books I'd like to prioritise by the end of the year. And one of those is The End of Policing by Alex S. Fatale. It says on the front, the problem is not police training, police diversity, or police methods. The problem is policing itself. And this is a belief system I hold. I think that the police and the prison system needs lots of change, both in this country and in the US, where I think these conversations predominantly focus on. But I would like to have a much more in-depth knowledge of those topics, so that when I think more deeply about getting rid of these structures we have in place, I can also think about how we could dismantle them and what we could do instead, right? So yeah, I've heard excellent things about this book and would like to give it a read. This next one is a new release, and I've been interested in reading this author's previous sort of investigative non-fiction book, and haven't got around to it yet. But I thought this one sounded like a great one to read in the colder months, so I will read this one first. And that is The Quickening, Creation and Community at the Ends of the Earth by Elizabeth Rush. The premise of this is that in 2019, 57 scientists and crew set out on board a ship to the Thwaites Glacier, which has never before been visited by humans. Their goal was to learn as much as possible about the mysterious Doomsday Glacier's rapid deterioration and its potentially catastrophic impacts on sea level rise. Elizabeth Rush documents their voyage, including, talking about what it's like seeing an iceberg for the first time, and also talking about like the general workday of people on this type of expedition, which I think were really interesting. And it says along the way she takes readers on a personal journey around a more intimate question: what does it mean to bring a child into the world at this time of radical planetary change? What emerges as a new type of Antarctica story, one preoccupied not with flag planting but with the collective and challenging work of imagining a better future. It says, with the contributions and concerns of women who were largely excluded from voyages until the last few decades, and of crew members of colour whose labour has historically gone unrecognised, The Quickening teamed with their voices with the colourful stories and personalities of Rush's shipmates in a thrilling chorus. I think that sounds absolutely excellent and could be a book I absolutely adore, so can't wait to read it. And then lastly, we have a book I have actually started reading. I'm about 80 pages into it, and it is The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness and Healing in a Toxic Culture by Garber Mate, with Daniel Mate, who is his son. I've never read any Garber Mate, and I've meant to, and I'm trying to start reading more books about the sort of mind-body connection. As I said, I've started going to therapy, and a big part of the reason why I've started going to therapy is because I have a condition called functional neurological disorder, which has many side effects, but is thought to be caused by sort of repressing mental health problems and your body sort of needing to send an alarm system for you to sort of have to deal with them. And so a big part of me being at therapy is trying to sort of break down all the walls I've created around that. And so I'm hoping that reading books like this and getting more knowledge about the mind-body connection will really help me with that. And so far this has been really interesting. It's really easy to read, really accessible, and also quite large font, quite well spaced. So even though it looks really long and intimidating, it isn't that much. So yeah, there's that one. Those are all the books that have recently come into my home. I have another like 15, 20 books on hold at the library that I'm waiting for. Things are a little bit out of hand. So I need to do lots of reading in the last few months of the year. So yeah, wish me luck. Let me know if you have read any of these books, if you are interested in reading any of them, or if you have any other recommendations for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.